It was 2024. The Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission released a report that sent shockwaves through law enforcement. Cocaine supply in Australia had reached the highest level in 30 years. The country was drowning in it, and authorities knew exactly who was responsible. Angelo Pandeli, National President of the Hells Angels Australia, alleged architect of a $1.5 billion drug empire, a man who had partnered with one of Europe's deadliest cartels to flood an entire continent with cocaine. But here is what made the situation truly shocking. He had never been convicted of a major crime. He was untouchable. This is the story of how a nightclub bouncer from Adelaide became the world's richest Hells Angel, built an international cocaine empire from Dubai, and stayed free by mastering one skill: distance. Angelo Pandeli had built the perfect life for a criminal. Luxury villas in Dubai, property scattered across Asia and Greece, a family posting their high-end lifestyle on social media for the world to see. He was running one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking networks in the world, and he was doing it in plain sight. For 6 years, Dubai had been his fortress. Untouchable, unreachable, safe. Then, in August 2024, everything collapsed. Pandeli had booked a trip to Cancun, Mexico, a global Hells Angels gathering. Leaders from chapters worldwide would discuss drug importation strategies, international coordination, and expansion plans. For Pandeli, it was supposed to be just another business meeting with the international criminal elite. He never made it to Cancun. Dubai authorities arrested him without warning. No public announcement, no media circus. Just UAE police taking Pandeli into custody. The reasons were never disclosed. No official statement. Within days, he was deported to Australia. Not extradited, deported. Extradition requires legal proceedings, evidence, formal requests between governments. Deportation is simpler. A country decides you are no longer welcome. They put you on a plane. Sydney Airport. Australian Federal Police were waiting. Officers from multiple agencies. They had been tracking Pandeli for over a decade. Since 2017, he had been listed as an Australian Priority Organisation target, a designation reserved for the most serious threats to national security, the kind of criminals who run empires, not just operations. Pandeli stepped off the plane. He was taken into custody, questioned, processed, then released. No charges, no arrest warrant, no court appearance. Law enforcement told media the same line repeatedly. He has not been charged with any crimes. Angelo Pandeli is a free man. The media exploded. An alleged drug kingpin deported from his safe haven, yet walking free in the country that hunted him for years. Someone linked to $1.5 billion in annual drug imports, the man allegedly responsible for Australia's worst cocaine crisis in 3 decades, yet avoiding prosecution entirely. The Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission had been monitoring him since the early 2010s. Multiple agencies across multiple countries had files on him. His name appeared in intelligence reports linking him to the Kinahan cartel, one of Europe's deadliest drug trafficking organizations. He was allegedly a key figure in the Aussie Cartel, a coalition that had revolutionized drug importation into Australia. Yet nothing stuck. The questions multiplied. Why did Dubai arrest him after 6 years of safe harbor? Why deport him so quickly? Why did Australia let him walk? To understand this, you need to understand what he built, and it started 3 years earlier in an alliance that would change Australia's cocaine market forever. The empire at its peak. While Angelo Pandeli was living comfortably in Dubai in 2021, something unprecedented was taking shape in Australian organized crime. Mark Buttle, the world commander of the Comancheros Motorcycle Club, was orchestrating it from overseas. Buttle had been coordinating operations remotely for years, always staying one step ahead of Australian authorities. But what he was planning now would change the entire drug trade landscape. Buttle saw what others were missing. The Australian drug market was exploding beyond anyone's expectations. Cocaine and methamphetamine trafficking was generating over $100 billion annually. The street prices were the highest in the world. A gram of cocaine selling for $70 to $90 in Europe was fetching $200 to $215 in Australia. The profit margins were absurd, and every major criminal organization on the planet wanted a piece of it. But there was a problem. The competition was chaotic and inefficient. Independent traffickers were cutting their own deals. Rival gangs were fighting bloody wars over territory. Shipments were getting intercepted at alarming rates because too many groups were trying to move product through the same routes at the same time. The market was incredibly lucrative, but it was also dangerously unstable. Buttle proposed something that had never been attempted in Australia before: a commission, not a gang, not a cartel in the traditional sense. A coalition of the most powerful criminal figures in the country working together instead of tearing each other apart. The plan was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution. Monopolize the cocaine and methamphetamine supply into Sydney. Force independent traffickers to either pay a percentage or get shut down completely. Coordinate importation routes so shipments would not conflict. Share intelligence to stay ahead of law enforcement. Eliminate competition through cooperation. It was organized crime operating like a multinational corporation, and it required the right partners. Buttle assembled a group that read like a who's who of Australian organized crime. Angelo Pandeli represented the Hells Angels as national president, bringing immediate access to 12 chapters and over 200 members spread across Australia. Hakan Ayik, a major figure linked to the Comancheros, contributed deep connections to international suppliers in Southeast Asia and South America. A Hong Kong national known only as Michael II allegedly provided ties to Chinese triads and Asian manufacturing networks. George Dib, a Lebanese businessman who owned Metro Petroleum, offered logistics infrastructure and sophisticated money laundering capabilities through legitimate business channels. Together, they created something Australian law enforcement had never encountered: a fully coordinated, multi-organizational drug trafficking network with direct supply links to Southeast Asian methamphetamine manufacturers and South American cocaine cartels. By 2021, intelligence agencies estimated the commission was worth $1.5 billion annually. The operation was directly linked to a $1 billion methamphetamine shipment that was eventually seized in Western Australia. When that seizure was made, authorities described it as one of the largest and most sophisticated drug operations in Australian history. But the seizure, as massive as it was, barely made a dent in the Commission's operations. Pandeli's role in the Commission was absolutely critical. From Dubai, he controlled the entire Australian distribution network. The Hells Angels provided infrastructure that independent traffickers could never match. 12 chapters across the country meant established warehouses, secure safe houses, and proven distribution points in every major city. Over 200 members provided a ready-made workforce that could move product, collect payments, and enforce agreements with violence when necessary. The club's deeply ingrained culture of loyalty and silence created operational security that law enforcement found nearly impossible to penetrate. Commission moved product through every available channel. Maritime routes using shipping containers and private boats. Air freight routes through corrupted customs officials at major airports. Land routes coordinated across state lines. The network had backup plans for the backup plans. If one route got compromised, another was already operational. It was systematic, professional, and devastatingly effective. But Pandeli was not satisfied with dominating just the domestic market. He wanted international connections that could guarantee unlimited supply and maximize profits on a global scale. That ambition led him to form an alliance that would define his criminal empire and make him one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world. The Kinahan cartel was already legendary in international drug trafficking circles. Founded by Christy Kinahan, an Irish criminal mastermind who had built a cocaine empire spanning multiple continents, the organization was now being run by his sons, Daniel Kinahan and Christy Kinahan Jr. They were based in Dubai, operating from the same city as Pandeli. The Kinahans controlled an estimated 1/3 of Europe's entire cocaine trade. Their network moved massive quantities of cocaine from Colombia through Ireland and into the UK, Spain, and beyond. Their estimated wealth exceeded €1 billion. Pandeli and the Kinahans were living in the same city, running similar operations, facing similar law enforcement pressures from their respective countries. Both were using Dubai as a safe haven to operate international drug trafficking networks while staying beyond the reach of authorities. The partnership was not just logical, it was inevitable. The alliance they formed was devastatingly effective in its simplicity. The Kinahans would leverage their established South American connections to source cocaine directly from Colombian suppliers. They would move it through their proven European network, using Ireland as the primary transit hub, before shipping it across the world to Australia. Once the cocaine arrived, Pandeli and the Hells Angels would take over distribution through the Commission's extensive network. The profit margins made the operation almost obscenely lucrative. Cocaine that cost $70 to $90 per gram in Europe was selling for over $200 per gram in Australia. Every single kilogram represented a profit of more than $100,000. The pipeline was moving hundreds of kilograms annually. Conservative estimates put the profits in the tens of millions of dollars per year. Some intelligence analysts believe the operation was generating over $100 million annually. This was not street-level drug dealing. This was industrial-scale cocaine trafficking being coordinated between two of the most sophisticated criminal organizations on the planet. The Kinahans provided the supply chain. Pandeli provided the distribution and demand. Together, they created one of the most profitable drug pipelines in global organized crime. Australian authorities watched it all happen in real time, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Intelligence reports documented the alliance in detail. Surveillance operations tracked meetings between associates. Then something happened that changed everything. Law enforcement agencies around the world had been running one of the most ambitious undercover operations in criminal justice history. They had created an encrypted phone platform called Unanswered and marketed it to criminals as the ultimate secure communication device. The phones were expensive, exclusive, and supposedly impossible for law enforcement to crack. Gangsters, cartel members, and traffickers around the world bought them by the thousands, believing their conversations were completely protected. They were catastrophically wrong. The entire platform was a law enforcement operation. Every message sent on N0M was being monitored. Every photo shared was being saved. Every coordinate dropped was being recorded. Every detail of every criminal operation being planned was being documented in real time by investigators. When authorities finally shut down Unanswered and launched coordinated arrests around the world, it became one of the largest takedowns in law enforcement history. In Australia alone, hundreds of people were arrested in simultaneous raids. The Commission was absolutely devastated. Key members of Pandeli's inner circle were taken into custody. Mark Buttle, the visionary architect of the Commission, was eventually arrested. Hakan Ayik became one of the most wanted fugitives in the world, with international arrest warrants and massive rewards offered for information leading to his capture. Associates and lower-level operatives across the entire network went down. But Angelo Pandeli remained in Dubai. Untouched, uncharged, still operating. Law enforcement agencies strongly suspected Pandeli had been extremely careful. He likely never used Unanswered devices himself, instead communicating exclusively through trusted proxies and intermediaries. Decades of experience in organized crime had taught him that direct involvement always left evidence. By staying removed, by operating through multiple layers, by using face-to-face meetings whenever possible, and having trusted associates handle all electronic communications, he ensured there was no direct link between himself and the operations. The Unanswered bust created a massive power vacuum in Australian organized crime. Major figures in the Commission were gone. The Comancheros' leadership was fractured and fighting amongst themselves. Independent operators were scrambling to fill the gaps. The entire market was thrown into chaos, and Angelo Pandeli allegedly moved to take complete control. With his Hells Angels network still fully intact and his Kinahan alliance still operational, he was in a unique position. Authorities believe that between 2021 and 2024, Pandeli actually became significantly more powerful than he had been before the bust. He absorbed what remained of the Commission's operations. He expanded his distribution network into territories that had previously been controlled by rivals. He increased shipments to meet demand that was no longer being filled by arrested competitors. Australia's cocaine crisis continued to spiral out of control. By 2024, drug abuse had increased by 30% compared to the previous year. Cocaine was flooding into the country at unprecedented levels. Authorities knew exactly where it was coming from. They knew exactly who was behind it. But Pandeli remained in Dubai, completely beyond their reach. For 3 full years, Angelo Pandeli lived openly in Dubai while running a billion-dollar criminal empire. He posted photos on social media showing his family's luxury lifestyle. He traveled freely between Dubai, Asia, and Greece. He lived the life of a legitimate wealthy businessman, all of it funded by an empire built on cocaine and methamphetamine. Australian authorities could only watch. International agencies could only monitor. The Kinahans faced increasingly severe pressure, including sanctions from the United States government with asset freezes and multi-million-dollar rewards offered for information. But Pandeli remained completely free. Then, in August 2024, he made plans to travel to Cancun for a global Hells Angels meeting. And without any warning, Dubai authorities arrested him. To understand why that arrest happened and why Dubai deported him so quickly after providing 6 years of protection, you need to understand where Angelo Pandeli came from. Angelo Pandeli was born in 1971 in Whyalla, a small industrial city on the coast of South Australia where the American dream met harsh reality. His parents were Turkish immigrants who had left everything behind, chasing opportunity in a country that promised a better life. They understood one simple truth: success required sacrifice. They bought pubs, a chain of them across South Australia. The Sundowner Hotel in Whyalla was their crown jewel. The businesses were profitable, providing a comfortable middle-class existence. But they also gave young Angelo a front row seat to a world most children never see. Criminal elements frequented these pubs, bikers wearing club colors that signaled allegiance and violence, drug dealers conducting transactions in shadowed corners, enforcers collecting debts with threats that everyone understood were not empty. These men did not have wealth or education, but they commanded something more valuable in that world: respect born from fear. Angelo did not just watch. He was learning lessons no classroom could teach. When the family relocated to Adelaide, Angelo carried that education with him. Adelaide in the 1990s was a war zone for outlaw motorcycle clubs. The Hells Angels, the Rebels, the Finks. They were not weekend riders. They were criminal armies fighting for territory, and the casualties were real. Angelo saw what others missed, beyond the brotherhood and the bikes and the romantic outlaw mythology. He saw infrastructure, drug distribution networks generating millions, protection rackets providing steady revenue, international connections that could move anything anywhere. These clubs were not gangs. They were corporations that happened to use violence as a business strategy. He needed in. But you do not just walk into the Hells Angels and ask for a membership form. That is when John Pike entered his life. Pike was Adelaide nightlife royalty with a dark edge. Everyone knew he had connections to the Hells Angels, though he denied it when convenient. He owned Heaven nightclub, and Heaven was where Hells Angels members drank, celebrated, and conducted the business they could not discuss anywhere else. Pike hired Angelo as a bouncer. On paper, it was a security job. In reality, it was an audition. Angelo was not just checking IDs at the door. He was inside the room where deals were made and debts were settled. He saw who met with whom. He overheard conversations that could end careers or lives. And critically, he proved himself. John Pike did not just give Angelo a job. He gave him a PhD in organized crime, the hierarchy of the club, the brutal probation process, how decisions flowed from national to chapter to street, how money moved up and orders moved down. Angelo was learning the game from someone who had mastered it. In 2000, Angelo Pandeli became a fully patched member of the Adelaide Hells Angels. The probation period had been designed to break men, and Angelo had survived it. He earned the patch, the colors, and something more valuable than both: respect from men who gave it to almost no one. But Angelo made a decision that separated him from every other new member. He kept working at Heaven. Most would have quit the legitimate work immediately. But Angelo understood optics. The nightclub job gave him reportable income and tax returns that looked clean. It kept him connected to the broader criminal ecosystem beyond just the Hells Angels. It gave him cover, and while working security, he was building an empire. By the early 2000s, Angelo was deep in the drug trade. The profits were not just good, they were transformative. Within a few years, he owned a $2 million mansion in Adelaide. He was in his early 30s, living like a successful businessman, except his business was cocaine and his office was the street. The mansion was a statement. It announced that he had won the game, but it was also a mistake. Police raided the property. They were building files, conducting surveillance, watching his every move. In a city the size of Adelaide, a $2 million mansion owned by a Hells Angels member might as well have had a spotlight on it. The heat was not just intense, it was unsustainable. Angelo realized something that would define the rest of his criminal career. In 2004, Angelo Pandeli left Adelaide for Sydney, Australia's largest city, the biggest drug market in the country, a place where a millionaire biker could blend into the background noise of organized crime. He was about to discover that Sydney was not just bigger than Adelaide, it was a different world entirely. And in that world, Angelo Pandeli would not just survive, he would become a king. The Sydney takeover. Sydney in 2004 was everything Adelaide was not. 4 million people, endless opportunities, criminal networks so sophisticated they operated like Fortune 500 companies. For a Hells Angels member with ambition, Sydney was not just a new city, it was the major leagues. Angelo Pandeli joined the Sydney chapter within weeks of arriving. The chapter president was Felix Lyle, a well-established leader who had been running operations for years. Lyle had connections, infrastructure, and the absolute loyalty of his members. Most new arrivals would have spent years proving themselves before gaining any real influence. Angelo did it in months. He was not just another patch. He arrived in Sydney with a reputation already built, with wealth already earned, and with an understanding of the drug trade that most members spent decades trying to learn. He knew how to operate without drawing heat. He knew how to structure deals that maximized profit while minimizing risk. He knew how to build relationships that mattered. The Sydney members noticed immediately. This was not some prospect trying to earn respect. This was someone who already had it. Angelo leveraged everything he had learned in Adelaide, but on a scale that would have been impossible in a smaller city. He built relationships with other Hells Angels chapters across Australia, creating a network that could move product from one coast to the other. He expanded distribution channels into markets that had never been touched. He brought business thinking to an organization that usually operated on instinct and violence. By the late 2000s, Angelo Pandeli was not just respected within the Sydney Hells Angels. He was essential. He was not participating in operations, he was designing them. Then in 2012, Felix Lyle went down on fraud charges. The details were kept quiet, but the outcome was clear. Lyle was going to prison, and the Sydney chapter needed new leadership. Angelo Pandeli did not wait to be asked. He stepped into the void. He became president of the Sydney City Crew, one of the most powerful Hells Angels chapters in the country. But Angelo saw something that others missed. With Lyle gone, there was a leadership vacuum at the national level. No one was coordinating between chapters. No one was thinking strategically about the organization as a whole. Angelo made his move. He became the Australian national president of the Hells Angels. The position gave him authority over 12 chapters and over 200 members spread across the entire country. He now controlled drug distribution networks in every major Australian city. He had direct connections to international suppliers. He had the infrastructure to move product across state lines as easily as most people move across neighborhoods. The media started calling him the Australian Godfather. For once, the media was not exaggerating. Angelo Pandeli was not running a motorcycle club anymore. He was running a criminal empire generating millions of dollars annually through cocaine and methamphetamine trafficking. But empires attract enemies, and the Australian Federal Police had been watching outlaw motorcycle gangs for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. By 2017, Angelo Pandeli was designated an Australian Priority Organisation target. That classification is not handed out lightly. It is reserved for individuals who represent major threats to national security, the kind of criminals who do not just commit crimes, but run organizations that destabilize entire communities. Law enforcement agencies across Australia were coordinating their efforts, sharing intelligence, building cases. They were looking for any opening, any vulnerability, any charge that would stick. Then the Australian Taxation Office made their move. In 2017, Pandeli was charged with failing to file his tax return for the 2014 to 2015 financial year. On the surface, it looked trivial, a bureaucratic oversight, a missing form, but anyone who understood law enforcement strategy knew exactly what this was: the Al Capone approach. The legendary American gangster had run Chicago through murder, extortion, and bootlegging for years. Police could not touch him for any of those crimes, so federal authorities went after him for tax evasion. It was the only charge they could make stick, and it sent Capone to prison for 11 years. Australian authorities were running the same playbook. The tax case was part of Operation Morpheus, a multi-agency task force specifically targeting outlaw motorcycle gangs. If they could not prove drug trafficking or murder or racketeering, they would nail him for taxes. The case moved forward. Pandeli was served with a notice at Sydney Airport. He ignored it. A court attendance notice was issued. The matter was going to court whether he liked it or not. Pandeli hired Warwick Korn, a well-known defense attorney who specialized in exactly these kinds of cases. The defense strategy was simple but effective. Blame the accountant. Claim the tax returns were not filed, due to a software error, not deliberate evasion. The outstanding amount was only $3,600. For a man allegedly running a multi-million-dollar drug empire, the amount was laughable. But the case was never about the money. It was about getting Pandeli into a courtroom. It was about establishing a legal precedent that could be used later. It was about showing him that Australian authorities were coming. In court, Pandeli pleaded guilty. The magistrate accepted the defense explanation. No conviction was recorded, no penalty was imposed. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. But Angelo understood what most people missed. This was not a victory. This was a warning shot. Australian authorities were probing for weaknesses. They were building files. They were coordinating with international agencies. If he stayed in Australia, the next case would not be about $3,600 in unpaid taxes. It would be about murder, racketeering, and drug trafficking. And those cases would not end with him walking free. Angelo needed distance. He needed to operate from somewhere Australian law enforcement could not reach. Angelo Pandeli made a decision that would define the rest of his criminal career. He relocated himself and his family to Dubai. He left behind a luxury apartment in Sydney and the day-to-day operations of the Hells Angels chapters. But he did not leave behind his position or his power. As national president, he could direct operations from anywhere in the world. Modern encrypted communications made it possible to run a criminal empire from 12,000 kilometers away. Dubai offered everything Angelo needed. The UAE had weak extradition enforcement with Australia. Financial secrecy laws made it nearly impossible for foreign agencies to trace money. The city was a hub for international business, both legitimate and criminal. Luxury real estate provided opportunities to launder assets, and the lifestyle was exactly what a wealthy criminal desired. Oceanfront villas, five-star restaurants, private clubs. A city where wealth was respected regardless of how it was obtained. But Dubai was not just a hiding place, it was a launching pad. The Dubai years. Dubai was not just a safe haven for Angelo Pandeli, it was paradise for criminals with money. The United Arab Emirates had built its reputation on financial secrecy, zero income tax, and a luxury lifestyle that asked no questions about where the money came from. Billionaires and celebrities flocked to Dubai for the tax benefits and privacy. But another class of wealthy individuals came for different reasons. Fugitives. international drug traffickers, war criminals, people who needed distance from law enforcement and had the resources to buy it. The UAE's extradition policies were a masterclass in selective enforcement. The country had treaties with various nations. High-profile criminals had lived in Dubai for years, despite arrest warrants and international pressure. The country valued its reputation as a global business hub above almost everything else. Extraditing wealthy residents was bad for business. For Angelo Pandeli, this meant freedom. He purchased luxury villas. He invested in legitimate businesses that could launder money. He posted on social media showing his family at expensive restaurants, on yachts, at exclusive events. He was not hiding. He was flaunting it. He traveled constantly. Asia for access to Southeast Asian methamphetamine manufacturers. Greece and Turkey for proximity to European drug networks. Dubai remained the central hub where deals were made and money was counted. Australian authorities could only watch. Intelligence reports tracked his every movement. But from Dubai, Pandeli was untouchable. The Australian Federal Police could build files. They could designate him a priority target. They could do everything except arrest him. And while they were watching, Angelo was building something unprecedented. When Mark Buttle created the commission in 2021, he gave Angelo the infrastructure to operate on an industrial scale. As the Hells Angels representative, Angelo brought 12 chapters and over 200 members into the alliance. The commission controlled everything: importation routes, distribution networks, enforcement operations across the entire country. But the commission was just the domestic side. Angelo's real power came from an alliance that would transform Australia's cocaine market forever. The Kinahan cartel was already legendary. Christy Kinahan had built one of the most powerful cocaine organizations in Europe, controlling an estimated 1/3 of the continent's cocaine trade. The family's wealth exceeded €1 billion. Daniel Kinahan, Christy's son, had relocated to Dubai in the 2010s to escape Irish law enforcement. Like Angelo, he saw Dubai as a place to operate freely while staying beyond the reach of European authorities. Two powerful criminals, same city, same problems, same goals. The partnership was inevitable. The alliance was devastatingly simple. The Kinahans would source cocaine from Colombia using decades-old relationships and proven smuggling routes. They would move it through their European network with Ireland as the transit hub. Then they would ship it to Australia, where Angelo's Hells Angels network would distribute it through the Commission's infrastructure. Every kilogram represented a profit exceeding $100,000. The pipeline moved hundreds of kilograms annually. Conservative estimates put annual profits in the tens of millions. Some intelligence reports suggested the operation generated over $100 million per year. Angelo lived like a king. Oceanfront villas, high-end vehicles, private jets. Social media documented it all: family vacations, luxury dining, exclusive parties. He was not just living openly. He was mocking the authorities who could not touch him. Australian law enforcement was drowning in frustration. They knew about the commission. They knew about the Kinahan alliance. They knew cocaine was flooding Australia at unprecedented levels. Intelligence reports documented everything. But knowing and proving are different universes. Angelo operated through layers of intermediaries. He used encrypted communications. He avoided direct involvement in shipments. Building a prosecutable case required evidence they could not obtain while he remained in Dubai. Then, in 2021, everything appeared to change. Law enforcement agencies worldwide had been running one of the most ambitious undercover operations in history. They had created Unanswered, an encrypted phone platform marketed to criminals as unhackable. Gangsters and traffickers around the world bought the devices believing their communications were protected. They were catastrophically wrong. Unanswered was a law enforcement operation. Every message was monitored, every photo captured, every coordinate recorded. Every criminal operation planned on the platform was being documented in real time. When authorities shut down Unanswered and launched coordinated arrests globally, organized crime was devastated. In Australia, hundreds were arrested. The commission was gutted. Mark Buttle went down. Hakan Ayik became one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Associates across the network were taken into custody, but Angelo Pandeli remained in Dubai, untouched, uncharged, still operating. Investigators suspected he had been paranoid in the best possible way. He likely never touched unarmed devices, communicating exclusively through trusted intermediaries. Decades in organized crime had taught him that direct involvement left evidence. Operating through proxies and maintaining distance from actual drug shipments meant there was no provable link between Angelo and the operations. The Unanswered bust created chaos in the Australian underworld. Leadership vacuums opened. Independent operators scrambled. The market destabilized. For most criminals, this would have been the end. For Angelo Pandeli, it was an opportunity. With his Hells Angels network intact and his Kinahan alliance still operational, Angelo allegedly moved to consolidate total control. Authorities believe he absorbed the Commission's remaining operations, taking over distribution networks previously controlled by the Comancheros and other organizations. His power did not contract after the bust. It expanded. Between 2021 and 2024, Australia's cocaine crisis exploded. By 2024, drug abuse had increased 30% compared to the previous year. The Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission reported cocaine supply was at its highest level in 3 decades. Border seizures indicated record quantities were being attempted. Authorities knew exactly who was behind it. Angelo Pandeli's name appeared in every major intelligence report on Australian drug trafficking. But he remained in Dubai, living openly, posting on social media, traveling freely, and running his empire from poolside. The Kinahans faced mounting pressure during this period. In 2022, the United States Treasury imposed sanctions on key members, including Daniel Kinahan, freezing assets and offering rewards up to $5 million for information leading to arrests. European countries intensified investigations. The cartel's operations were disrupted but not destroyed. Angelo adapted like water flowing around obstacles. When the Kinahans faced heat, he diversified supply sources. When border security increased, he shifted routes. When associates were arrested, he replaced them. For 3 years, he operated with what appeared to be complete impunity. Then, in August 2024, Angelo made plans to travel to Cancun, Mexico, for a global Hells Angels gathering. Leaders from chapters worldwide would discuss international operations and strengthen alliances. For Angelo, it was an opportunity to cement his position as one of the most powerful figures in the international Hells Angels network. He never boarded that flight. Dubai authorities arrested him without warning. No public statement, no official explanation. The UAE government remained completely silent on why they had suddenly moved against a man they had protected for 6 years. Within 1 week, Angelo Pandeli was deported to Australia. And when he arrived in Sydney, Australian authorities who had spent over a decade building cases against him did something that shocked everyone. They let him walk free. No charges, no arrest, no explanation. The questions that followed would remain unanswered. Why did Dubai suddenly turn on him? Why deport him so quickly instead of going through formal channels? And most baffling of all, why did Australian authorities release a man they had designated a national security threat the moment they finally had him in custody? To understand those questions, you need to understand not where Angelo ended up, but where he began. And that story started decades earlier in a place far from Dubai's luxury and Sydney's power. The unanswered questions. Angelo Pandeli's August 2024 arrest and deportation created more questions than answers. And in the months that followed, those questions only deepened. The first mystery was Dubai itself. Why did the UAE suddenly arrest a man they had protected for 6 years? Angelo had been living openly in one of the most surveilled cities on Earth. Dubai authorities knew exactly who he was, what he did, and who he worked with. They had allowed him to purchase property, conduct business, and travel freely. Then overnight, that protection vanished. No official explanation was ever given. The UAE government did not issue a statement. No charges were filed. in Dubai. No evidence was presented. Angelo was simply taken into custody, held for days, then put on a plane to Australia. The theories ranged from plausible to conspiracy. Some investigators believed diplomatic pressure from Australia had finally worked. Perhaps the Australian government had offered something valuable enough to make the UAE reconsider their stance. Trade agreements, intelligence sharing, military cooperation, the kind of backroom deals that never appear in official records. Others suspected the decision was purely business. Dubai's reputation as a safe haven for criminals had become a liability. International pressure was mounting. The United States had sanctioned the Kinahans, and Angelo's public association with them was becoming embarrassing. Perhaps deporting Angelo was Dubai's way of signaling they were willing to cooperate with Western law enforcement when it suited their interests. A third theory was darker. Some believed Angelo had crossed a line even Dubai would not tolerate. Perhaps he had conducted business in the UAE that violated their strict internal rules. Perhaps he had angered someone more powerful than himself. Perhaps his planned trip to Cancun had triggered intelligence that made keeping him in Dubai too risky. But here is what made the situation truly bizarre. Angelo was deported, not extradited. Deportation is what countries do when they want someone gone quickly without legal proceedings. Extradition requires evidence, hearings, formal requests between governments, and legal representation. Deportation requires none of that. It is administrative, final, no appeals. If Australian authorities had requested extradition, they would have needed to present evidence of crimes. They would have needed to prove their case in a UAE court. Angelo would have had lawyers arguing against transfer. The process could have taken years. Instead, Dubai simply removed him from the country and sent him to Australia within a week. No trial, no evidence presented. Just a one-way ticket to Sydney, which leads to the second and more baffling question. Why did Australian authorities release him? Angelo Pandeli had been designated an Australian Priority Organisation target since 2017. That classification is not given lightly. It means law enforcement considers you one of the most serious threats to national security and public safety in the entire country. Multiple agencies had been building cases against him for over a decade. The Australian Federal Police, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, state police forces, international partners. They had intelligence reports linking him to the commission. They had surveillance connecting him to the Kinahan cartel. They had financial investigations showing money moving through his networks. They knew about the Hells Angels operations he controlled. They had informants, wiretaps, and years of documentation. And when Dubai handed him directly to them at Sydney Airport, they questioned him for hours, processed him, and then released him without filing a single charge. The official statement was brief and deeply unsatisfying. He has not been charged with any crimes. As of now, Angelo Pandeli is a free man. The legal explanation is that knowing someone committed crimes and proving it in court are entirely different challenges. Angelo had operated through layers of intermediaries for decades. He used encrypted communications. He avoided direct involvement in drug shipments. He structured his operations so there was always separation between himself and the actual criminal acts. Prosecutors need evidence that meets the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. They need witnesses willing to testify. They need physical evidence linking the defendant directly to specific crimes. Without that, they have nothing that will survive a courtroom. But releasing a designated national security threat within hours of finally having him in custody, that seemed less like a lack of evidence and more like something else was happening behind the scenes. Some investigators privately suggested Angelo might be cooperating, that he had made a deal, that in exchange for information about the Kinahans, the Commission, or other international networks, Australian authorities agreed not to prosecute him. It would explain the quick release. It would explain the lack of charges. It would explain why everything went silent so quickly. Others believed the opposite. They suspected Australian authorities had been warned by Dubai that if they charged Angelo, certain information would become public. Information that could embarrass the Australian government. Information about how long they had known about the Commission and done nothing. Information about corrupted officials who had facilitated drug shipments. The kind of information that ends political careers. There was also the possibility that Angelo simply had better lawyers and better preparation than authorities expected. That he had spent years ensuring there was no prosecutable evidence against him. That he had built his empire specifically to be legally untouchable, even if everyone knew what he was doing. Whatever the truth, Angelo Pandeli walked out of Sydney Airport a free man in August 2024. And then he made a decision that added yet another layer of mystery to an already incomprehensible situation. In January 2025, Angelo sued News Corp Australia for defamation. The lawsuit alleged that media coverage had damaged his reputation, caused emotional distress to his family, and exposed them to public scrutiny and danger. He was demanding financial compensation and public retractions. A man who had been called the Australian Godfather, who had been linked to billion-dollar drug empires and international cartels, was now claiming the media had unfairly damaged his reputation. The lawsuit suggested confidence. It suggested Angelo believed he could withstand the legal discovery process that would come with a defamation case. It suggested he was not afraid of what might be revealed in court documents or depositions. Then, in March 2025, Angelo abruptly dropped the lawsuit. No explanation was given. No settlement was announced. The case simply disappeared from court records. And so did Angelo Pandeli. Since dropping the lawsuit, Angelo has not been seen publicly. He has not posted on social media. He has not been photographed at events. His whereabouts are unknown. Australian authorities claim they are monitoring him, but they will not confirm his location. The man who lived openly in Dubai for 6 years, who flaunted his wealth on social media, who operated a criminal empire in plain sight, has vanished. Which raises one final question that may never be answered. Is Angelo Pandeli's disappearance temporary, or did something happen that forced him underground permanently? Because in the world of international drug trafficking, when powerful criminals suddenly go silent, it usually means one of three things. They are preparing to return stronger than before. They are cooperating with law enforcement, or someone more powerful than them has decided they know too much. The legacy and future. The Hells Angels still control 12 chapters and over 200 members. They still have supplier connections, distribution infrastructure, and corrupted officials. Removing one leader does not dismantle a system that took decades to build. From bouncer to alleged $1.5 billion empire, 24 years, 0 major convictions. Angelo Pandeli survived every investigation, deported from Dubai, released by Australia without charges. Why did Dubai arrest him? Why did Australia let him walk? Where is he now? One truth remains. Angelo Pandeli built a system so carefully constructed that he became untouchable. And while he remains free, Australia's cocaine crisis continues to worsen. Some ghosts are too smart to catch.